I'm Dr. Ruth Roberts, your pet's ally, and I hope that you are all well. Hio has decided she can, Hio, come here, defend us from everything awful and evil here. There's lots of noise in the city, and it's it's been an adjustment for all of us. And thanks for that. Thanks for the coloring and the kitties, the black and white. Yeah. Oh, come here. Oh, come here. Yes, I know it's so scary. Yeah, so scary. Hi again, Bettina. Glad you were all able to join. Um, Pam, I am so sorry I missed this last week. We had a crazy few days getting to Mexico, and then getting back was also fun. So Kathy gave you excellent responses here. Let me pop your, uh, or I should say, spirits um, report up here, and this can be absolutely overwhelming. So what I would say is, you look at this, and this is kind of the upside and downside. So of this, view this as a roadmap. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that um, Glacier Peaks has their own line of supplements and that of Adored Beast, which makes some great stuff, but these are their answers to the problems. And so I think we can work through some of this without, yeah, and the mineral analysis, I think that will be helpful too for sort of honing in. But first thing first, the food. And when you look at this, this is absolutely overwhelming. The thing I have been noticing on these last several reports back from this test is that every pet is allergic to every grain. So I'm not quite sure if that's really the truth or if that's something they're sort of um, what is the right word? Selecting for at a lower level of sensitivity. Let's put it that way. Uh, yeah, so let's walk through this. So the proteins, your problem is you've got a whole freezer full of food. That's an issue. So the proteins that you could use would be bison. Um, these are esoteric and relatively expensive: rabbit, venison, yak, turkey, as you said, and then some sort of inexpensive fish. So you could use something like mackerel or salmon, which is not terribly inexpensive, but sometimes you can get a good deal. And so the point of this is to use this as a roadmap. And as you pointed out, it says not so much on the turnips, but indeed that's what helped his stool get better. So the best way I can tell you to approach this is to go through this piece by piece. If you have a ton of food left in the freezer and spirit is at a place where he can sort of deal with it, then go through what you've got. But what I would suggest doing going forward is choosing three proteins. So um, you could use, good, half of it's turkey, so you're halfway there. So just burn up the other stuff. So use, again, if bison is affordable, um, and I would go with that, the turkey, obviously, and then choose a fish. Alternatively, if one of the fishes are less expensive than the bison, you could use that as well. And then in place of the carbohydrates, I would use more beans. So we can say we would definitely use the regular ratio of beans, and then we need to add in about um, a cup of grain is about 400 calories, so we need to add an additional 400 calories. We could do that with some more beans, although that's going to start pushing that ratio of carbohydrates up there, and adding in maybe a little bit more phytates than he can handle. And what I would do is, so you could do alternatively, is use about 3.5 tablespoons additional oil. Now remember, you're going to lose 4 cups of volume from taking the grain out. And so what that means is that if if the batch produces roughly 16 cups of food with the grain, we take away the 4, and that takes us down to 12 cups of food. So we need to remember to reduce the volume that he is eating by 25% roughly. And if you've added the oil back in to make up the calories, that's going to be calorie for calorie the same. So um, no, oats are not okay. Hi, Susan. So, and that's the thing. So, all the grains are listed here in red. And so, amaranth, barley, buckwheat, corn, millet, oat, quinoa, rice, both white and brown, rye, spelt, and wheat. So, really, you've got no grains that would be useful, um, according to this test. And I may start digging around because, again, every pet I've seen has, hey, Janice, has these. Grains all lit up in red. Now, so that's what I'm saying is that in place of the grains, use a little bit more oil, um, and then feed 25% less than you are currently, so that we don't kind of increase the ratio of the beans beyond what he can handle. And then take out all the vegetables that are in red. Hi, Kathy. So that's what I would do, and then to choose. So let's say day one is turkey, then choose black-eyed peas, and then choose an oil. Like if you can find a really well cleanly processed safflower oil, use that. Coconut oil is still okay. The vegetable oils are going to be things like avocado, things of that nature. Yeah, teff, no, I would just, because it's closely related to wheat, so I would just let all the grains go for right now. I know that's really frustrating, but again, we're using this as a roadmap. So we're going to take out all of the things in red and just see how it goes. You may find that you need to reintroduce turnips to keep the stool under control. Again, this is not gospel, and the same thing is true with any of the food tests. So it's, whether it's Dr. Dodd's or whether it's Heska's or this test, they will say, oh, this is something your pet is sensitive to. Uh, but um, when you test it, then by physically giving that particular food to your dog, then you find, no, this is really okay. But it's best to start with removing all of this um, to, to get from the get-go. And then once you've had, 3 to 6 weeks and things are looking good, then we start adding it back in and testing it, as Kathy said. So let me go over the part about the less grain. So if a batch of food, you've got 3 pounds of protein, um, you've got your beans in there, whether that's a can of beans or half a cup of dry beans, and you've got 2 cups of grain in the recipe. Um, yeah, exactly, Jamie. Um, so the total volume of food in that batch, when you make it, you've added in the oil, you've added in the water and all that other stuff, the calcium, blah, 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 you have 16 cups of food. 4 cups of that 16 cups is the grain. Because if you start with, I'm pardon me, I'm in error. So if you start with a cup of raw grain, that's 2 cups of cooked. So out of the 16 cups of cooked, we're taking out 2 cups with the grain when we remove them. Does that make sense, ladies? So now we have 14 cups total of food instead of 16. So what you're going to need to do then is, let's see, 14 divided by 16 is 0.875. So you would feed basically about 15% less volume because we're removing the grains, but we're going to add to replace that caloric amount. We're going to add about 3.5 or so tablespoons of oil. So we have in the 14 cups the same number of calories that was in the 16 cups. Does that make more sense? So because of that, then you're going to feed volume-wise about 15% less, but you're still going to have the same number of calories in that volume of food. I hope that makes sense. It's like the math is coming back to haunt me. So, um, I hope that's making sense, Pam. Let's kind of look through a couple of more things here too. And yeah, hexane and toluene are other toxins, that he's reacting to. Uh, no, so Pam's asking, do I make 3 batches at once? Do I need to make less? They seem to be at least without for at least 60 days. And no, you don't. So if you choose your batches, make it with each of the proteins, and then go ahead and make the 3 new batches, and then go from there. So instead of a mixed batch, you'll have um, one of say bison, one of turkey, and then one of a fish. Does that make a little more sense? Hopefully so. Um, and then there's some other things down here as far as items that are potentially toxic. Um, this has always puzzled me. Porphyrin is a byproduct, a waste product of hemoglobin breaking down. And yes, that will be so of the oil, you will add the 6 tablespoons, which is in each of the regular batches, plus an additional 3.5 tablespoons. You'll have 9.5 tablespoons of oil. Does that make sense? So I think you may have to back up and break your batches down a little bit. And this, if this is not making sense, May, then just drop me a note and we can get on a quick call. But this is kind of how I would break it out. Let me go back up to the food again and let's walk through that one more time. So essentially, this is how I would set up a rotation and elimination diet, and this is kind of the whole point of it. And let me put this template in the comments for you so you can see kind of, yeah, we want to make 3 batches of different stuff. Let's see if I can add this as a comment, but it doesn't seem to be wanting to let me do that. What I'll do is I'll post this in the group, so that you can see. So let me do this. Make a comment. So here's our goal, is to set it up into 3. Yeah, and you want to make 3 batches of different things. Um, and then this way you're going to be able to carry this off. So, where it says chicken, pork, turkey, we're going to substitute in beef for the chicken, and then some sort of fish for the pork tenderloin. And then going back to this chart, then we're going to next choose uh, a bean for each of the diets, and that's what's not included here. But in this case, you will use a bean. You can, and also, let's see, potatoes and sweet potatoes are no as well. So we're going to choose a bean for each of the batches, and then we're going to choose some brassica veggies, and then also some other veggies, and then an oil. So if we pop that back over to here, then what that may mean is something like, um, let's pop this over a little bit. Um, we may have kale. Kale is good. Yes, that's correct. Because and what you're going to do is freeze this differently too. So once you figure out what you're going to put into each batch, so we can use kale. Yep, good, good. Winter squash is okay, so you could use butternut squash. We're going to, in this case, we're taking out the quinoa and putting in the beans. And then day 2, pork. Okay. So I don't know, Pam, you're going to have to figure it out. maybe you're making a batch the way people usually pull this off. And then so that, let me go through the rest of this too. So cabbage is fine. Uh, green beans are not okay. So let's switch to some zucchini for the second day. And then day 3, broccoli is fine. We've already used zucchini, so we'll throw in some summer squash to kind of balance out the taste of the broccoli. So yellow squash or something of that nature. So here's what most people will end up doing, because we're going to feed this every 24 hours. You will want to make a batch and then feed that for the day, and then bag up the rest of it, or box up the rest of it into 24-hour um, volume. So if he eats normally 2 cups a day, and we're going to take 15% out of that, that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about um, 2 and so that's going to be about 1 3/4 cup um, per meal per day. Yeah, you do need to rotate daily, ideally, to help the gut heal over. So that's kind of the um, if you go into the members area and look at the gut health program, that's where I kind of break this down in detail. But once you get the recipe figured out, here's what is the best practice. If you feed a certain set of foods every 24 hours, and then the next day another set of foods, and then the next day another set of foods, and then you start over with batch 1, what you're doing is preventing the immune system from reacting to foods that it is seeing on a daily basis. So this is sort of the basic premise with leaky gut syndrome, is that because we tend to get in this habit of feeding the same thing day in and day out because it's easy. I mean, we do it for ourselves. We essentially create an immune reaction to the foods that we eat or that we feed on a daily basis. With leaky gut syndrome, if we, let me pop this back up so I can give you the little, so if you think about the gut, it's got all these little villi and microvilli, and each of the villi are lined with enterocytes. And, it's just a much more complicated structure than that. But here's the basic idea. With leaky gut syndrome, this happens. You get denuding of the microvilli, you get the little villi literally cut off at the base. And so as that process picks up speed and worsens, then all of the improperly digested foods go straight down into the immune system. So, underlying, in this neighborhood is all the absorption process. The enterocytes, the individual cells, do more processing, and then lining these villi are um, are the gut activated lymphatic system. So if stuff is getting absorbed directly to the lymphatic system, then your dog's body begins to see that as an attacker, and so develops antibodies against what they've been eating, and then off we go to creating other issues. So this is why I stress rotating foods, because as we age, our capacity to heal and to avoid problems, um, then it is, this helps to seal things over. And then the other thing that Kathy mentioned is that she used Mega Immune, which has, which I've used myself and for many other patients, because it helps to seal off the gut and heal. So it includes 4 specific amino acids, and yeah, and also several immunoglobulins that will help the gut heal over. And this is not a cheap process, honestly, and I've had to repeat it for myself multiple times, and it's always things I don't really like to eat, but it is very effective. During this time, you're going to want to also use high doses of probiotics, and so What I would suggest using is not phytospore, but megaspore biotic, the human version, which does not have any flavoring agents in it as far as beef liver goes. So, yeah, ideally you would rotate daily for 3 to 6 weeks here and then start to test foods as Kathy laid out really clearly right here. Um, so it's a pain in the butt. I mean, it honestly is, but it is effective. And I think that most, Kathy would say that the majority of their issues have now really pretty well resolved. And I know we've got something else to talk about. So, May, if that's not making sense, let me know. You can to make it inexpensive, you can use canned mackerel. It's not ideal, but if it makes it work, it makes it work. And then choose some other fish that's a little less expensive. Um, yeah, so I mean, ideally, every time you make a new batch, you would make a new, set of food. And again, this is kind of the idea is that, if we can, yes, you want to get down now. If we can help reduce inflammation in the gut by tricking the immune system into not responding to what the pet is eating, then that's great. That's the way it's supposed to work. So yes, ideally rotate, rotate, rotate everything. It's rare to see things like fats create problems, but we've seen salmon oil create a problem in several of y'all's pets. So it's really frustrating. Um, so I think let me just double check below. Uh, Yeah, no, and I think the chicken was lit up in red. So, yeah, definitely. So it takes a little bit of time, and what you may want to do is on a different sheet of paper. Where did that go? Yeah, and that's a good question too. So on a different sheet of paper, write down the things that you can use and that you can afford to use. So chicken is red, that's out. So you can use turkey. Um, these are all pretty expensive proteins to find. So look, figure out what you can afford and then figure out, 3 sets of beans that you could use and then 2 sets of veggies. So how do you cook? And this is a great question too. So how do you cook fish in the pot? What I would do is cook everything except the fish, let it all finish cooking, and then turn the crock pot off, throw the fish in, and literally the heat that's left in the food is going to cook the fish. Otherwise, it does get pretty stinky, and plus you end up way, way, way overcooking. So that's pretty easy. Yeah. So, and what Jamie is saying, that's what she's trying to do because Willie, God bless him, has got so many issues with immune system response that rotating foods frequently is going to be very important so he does not develop worse leaky gut syndrome, so to speak. Yeah, so take a deep breath, write down the things you can use, and then use the kind of this template to figure out how to do it for spirit. So again, you're going to substitute in beans for the quinoa. You're going to add an extra, and I think in the files there is that template for how much of each volume wise to do it. But use that extra 3.5 tablespoons of oil to make up the grain and go from there. So hopefully that is making sense. Let me, yeah, and that's another way to do it too. All right, so I think we've got that covered. And again, May, if this is still boggling your mind, just reach out and we can get you some help. Um, so, Catherine is asking about their 2-year-old dog having neuter and gastropexy Tuesday. And let me get there. So, if you head over to the website, click on Simplex M, Um, and probably for your buddy, you're going to want to get the bigger one. Um, so Simplex M, again, what we're trying to do here is to replace essentially the raw materials that the testes are producing to help support function. Um, and then so one tablet contains each of those things. Generally, with people, they will suggest using 3 tablets 3 times a day. Now, your poodle, Catherine, I think is somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 pounds. And so, what I would suggest is to go sort of high to start with. And I would go with, yeah, they may make you more crazy, Pam, because they're going to tell you you need all those other supplements too. Um, so yeah, but see, and they're also going to tell you to feed raw. Anyway, so be that as it may, that's where you go. Um, so back to this. So what I would suggest is start with 2 tablets twice daily, see how things are. If you're not noticing any issues after about 30 days, I would go to probably a tablet and a half twice a day, and you can pop these suckers in half pretty easily. But the goal here again is to um, keep the body working normally. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear they were helpful, Kathy. Good. That's great because normally what they tell everybody is raw, and then you need all these other supplements too. So see where that goes. There's the link for the Simplex M. Let's see. Let me pop back over here. Um, and then the other big thing, Catherine, is to remember that essentially what you're doing is putting your dog into andropause immediately. So you want to get keep exercise level high and make sure that he's not picking up weight. Now, um, if here's the other thing I'm going to say, if he is not creating problems as far as peeing on stuff, fighting with other dogs, things of that nature, you may consider delaying it out to 5 years, because that's sort of when andropause would begin. Having said that, I know that boarding kennels and daycare and things of that nature generally will not accept unneutered male dogs or female dogs for that matter. So there is that. Now, Kathy, your pups, um, the creatinine doesn't bother me that much because they're eating, uh, a relatively higher protein diet. And it looks like, you went from 2, taking the treats out, down to 1.8. Now, yeah, so if anything in red you want to take out, so you could substitute ginger if that looks okay for turmeric. Yes, you should stop those as well. Sorry. And again, what you're doing is seeing if things make a difference or don't make a difference. After the 6 weeks, you can reintroduce things and then see if the symptomatology returns. So, back to Kathy's pup. Yeah, what is bothersome here is the hematocrit. And you said you're adding a cup of water to each meal, and she really doesn't drink much water on her own. So, what I would suggest doing is adding maybe 2 cups of water if you can per meal, or figuring out how to flavor some water, either with some stock or something of that nature, just to get more water through her. And I would not put her on a low protein diet until you get the essentially the dehydration situation put together. The other thing to remember is she is a desert dog, right? You brought her from Morocco. You're in a very dry environment in LA, and so this simply may not be possible. Um, yeah, so I would just keep working on diluting her out more, and see if that will help bring that hematocrit down to a more normal level. And um, and by the way, when I first started practice in the 90s, and a hematocrit of 45 to 50 wasn't unusual, but 60 is really a bit more than I would like to see. So if you can get her down to 45 or 50, I think that would be fine. So add a little bit more water, see if that comes down. Um, and then mosquito repellents, Wondercide works really well. And then there's another question about uh, flea and tick and heartworm. So here's a recipe using essential oils for flea and tick. Remember that um, you need to apply this and or okay, so essential oil recipe. Um, yep. Um, so you do need to apply any type of natural flea and mosquito repellent every 12 to 24 hours, depending on how bad things are. I apologize, I forgot about that. You lived on the coast, but my guess is that the humidity is somewhere around 30% or something like that. And so what I would do is just focus on, um, yeah, exactly. So what I would do is focus on getting her to drink more consistently and then just ask for hematocrit. And I would do this in about 2 to 3 weeks after you've kind of gotten more fluid into her. Yeah, so broth, bone broth, a little bit of food in the water, something like that, just to keep the water rolling through. So those are great suggestions, Jamie. Um, let's see. And Janice is also asking about the commercial flea and tick. And Janice, again, it depends on where you are. Yes. And so if they're going to repel fleas, they will also repel mosquitoes. And so hence the two recipes for the essential oils and then using Wondercide as well. But again, you do have to use it every 12 to 24 hours. Okay, so you're probably at about 50 or 60% there then, humidity as far as LA. So yeah, that doesn't quite make sense then. Scratch that concept. Um, so again, just pump the water through as best you can. So alternatives to commercial flea and tick heartworm preventive. So again, it depends on where you are. If you are in an area where there's a ton of heartworms, and if you're not sure where that is, um, hopefully I typed in enough that things are going to show up for us. Yeah, Janice. So that's what I thought. Janice, I can't tell you. So if we look at, so here's 2010. I think the last one, yeah, here's 2016. So, South Carolina's pretty bright red. Um, and I think this pattern shifted slightly. Um, and I'll get that question in a second. So in South Carolina, Janice, you can try natural stuff for fleas and ticks. I have a feeling, I think you're in the upstate though, so you may not have such a problem, but you may find that you end up getting overrun um, with fleas, unfortunately. So again, if you go back to the blog, click that link I sent you and just type in fleas. There's several broadcasts I've done as far as, yeah, I think you're in the Greenville area, if I'm remembering correctly now. But there's several broadcasts I've done talking about heartworm and flea prevention. Do environmental control as far as use nematodes to treat the yard, use an insect growth regulator in the house to keep the majority of the flea population under control. So if you kill those guys off, you've killed off 85% of the problem. Don't use the oral stuff. Obviously, if you run into a problem, I would suggest trying a Seresto collar. Otherwise, with the other two links, Wondercide is an option for flea control, and then the essential oil recipe. Again, you have to apply this every 12 hours. So your flea issues are not going to be as horrible as they were down in the low country. Now, as far as heartworm prevention, this says it all. South Carolina is pretty darn red, and in many ways. Um, but what that means is that you really do, in my opinion, you really need to use the commercial heartworm preventives. And what I would suggest using is HeartGuard or one of its generics. So Iverheart, I think, is the one that consistently works well. TriHeart had some issues with recalls for efficacy problems. Now, even the American Heartworm Society, which is what who puts these maps out, says now that you can use it every 60 days. And the temperature at night must be over 55 degrees for for the heartworms to reproduce inside the mosquitoes. So what that means is that from roughly, I'm guessing, March until October for you, every 60 days, I would give a regular full dose of an ivermectin based heartworm preventive product. Find the one with the least amount of stuff in it, um, and then go from there. So every 60 days, give the heartworm preventive. A day later, start with some milk thistle, and roughly, 175 to 240 milligrams per day for dogs up to 50 pounds for 1 week, and then for dogs over 50 pounds, 2 capsules, 1 capsule twice a day of milk thistle for 1 week. And what you're doing is helping to clean out any of the residual effects of the heartworm prevention. Again, remember, it only sticks around for 24 hours. That's why we wait 24 hours to start the heartworm prevention to clean it out, and then it helps to get rid of some of these other things as far as the flea medications that seep through the skin invariably, and then all the other, glyphosate and um, all the other stuff that's just in the environment. So we know now that glyphosate is in the water cycle. So it's just tough. Um, so I hope that makes sense. Let me pop back over to the page, and I'll come back to some of these other questions in the comments here. And Willie's doing okay. Um, and so you're going to start Palladium Monday. Things are getting worse. Um, as far as the prednisone, what I would consider doing, I don't know of a reason not to give prednisone with Palladia until things start to come under control. And the thing is that what I'm concerned about is that if we, right now, prednisone is your only Western tool in the box right now. And so what I'm concerned about is that um, if we take that away, that things will get considerably worse. And so what I would do is give the Palladia a week or two to kind of kick in and see how things are going, and then try to titrate off the prednisone, um, and see, as far as on the Palladia days, no pred, off days use the prednisone, and then yeah, adding back in the CBD and THC, I think, is a great idea. And PEA, I would definitely look into. Um, and then the poly-MVA, I would definitely look into. Um, Curcumin, I think, at a higher dose, and I think Dr. Lisa had recommended the Gaia one, and I think that's reasonable. The one I've got's uh, a little less potent, but he kind of needs all the help he can get at this point. So try that, Jamie. Um, and then let me roll back up here. So Pam was asking, is there an average amount of water they should drink? And the average is something like a couple of 1 to 2 ounces per pound of body weight per day. And with crockpet, you are indeed feeding water, and so it may not be as necessary to drink as much water. But again, a good rule of thumb without doing a hematocrit, and you can look back at past labs to see if what they've been. Um, again, a hematocrit of 45% doesn't bother me. It's also not unusual to see them down as low as 30%. Um, so but physically looking at your pet, what you would do is touch the gum. Is it slick or is it dry and tacky? And look at rolling the eyes. Does it take a few seconds for it to come back? The skin tenting test on the back of the neck. So you can see I'm actually a little dehydrated. And then um, the other thing is the capillary refill time also on the gums. On humans, they do it on our thumbnails, and you push and see how long it takes for the color to come back. Same thing on the gums. Normal is about 1 to 2 seconds. So if those things look low and the urine is super dark, that's probably the easiest way to look at it. Is the urine sort of a nice yellow color, or is it super dark? If it's super dark, they need more water. So I hope that is helpful. Kathy asked, is Wonderside better than Cedarside? I think they're both trade names of different cedar oil products. And then Janice was asking, no HeartGuard for the other months, right? So, you know, again, look at your temperatures to because I'm sort of saying this off the cuff, but my guess is that between um, the end of October and the beginning of March, most of the nights are going to be below 55 degrees. And so that temperature is critical for the heartworms to be able to develop within the mosquitoes. I mean, we may see mosquitoes in January, but it's never gotten above 55 degrees at night. So they're actually generally not able to infect with heartworms. And so I think you can use a whole lot less than you've been told. And many veterinarians would tell me I'm uh, saying heresy, um, but it's the truth. And then that's the research. And if you go to the American Heartworm Society website, you're gonna see that there. Yeah. Okay. And yep. All right. Great. I think we've got it all covered. Let me double check. Yeah, we do. Why? All right. So, hope to see you all again tomorrow afternoon at 4 Mountain, 5 um, Central, 6 Eastern. I think it'll take me a little bit to get there. And we'll talk about the tissue mineral analysis and any other questions. So, let me know what the Glacier Peak folks say. I'd be interested to hear that too. And we'll go from there. It was my impression what they were telling folks before is you have to feed raw and you have to use these 12 other supplements. So let me know, and because that'd be great to hear that they're giving folks good feedback. So until tomorrow afternoon, you all take good care of yourselves and give everybody a big hug. Thanks.